The 719th edition of the Four Corners podcast starts right now.
This is the Four Corners podcast.
Elton ready on his second attempt. That one is no good. They battle for it. Loose ball. Recovered. Marvin. He scores. 17 seconds left. And he was fouled. Here we go. Lawson with a runner. No. The rebound. Hansbrough at the gun. Got it.
They were 4 for 24.
Hansbrough on a switch on Paulus. A deep three. And Green rips down the rebound in traffic. 4-on-1.
What a great job. What a terrific job in transition. I mean, you couldn't plan that any better as a coach.
Tipped away by Johnson. It's loose. Page. Johnson.
They're dancing in the aisles. They're high-fiving. They're celebrating. They're going bananas on Franklin Street.
Pass to Britt, 15 seconds to play. Up high to Page, gets a screen from Meeks. Page driving in on the left, high off the glass for 2. 6 seconds to go. Pinson comes front court. Pinson to May for the win. Got it! Luke May! He got it! 0.3 of a second! Luke May gives Carolina the 75-73 lead. Are you kidding? Into Dixon. Boozer switches onto him. Dixon the kick. Trimble! Got it! And Carolina wins
Here are your hosts, Josh Marlowe and Anthony Pagnotta.
Hello and welcome into another live edition of the Four Corners podcast. We are powered by Carolina Electrical Services. Josh Nathan here with you guys on a Tuesday night. Quite a bit to talk about around the Carolina basketball program. There's been an addition to Michael Malone's staff and a fun twist, one that I don't think anyone saw coming. Carolina will host a recruit this weekend for the 2026 recruiting cycle. That'll also take place, and some interesting conversation coming out of the NBA draft combine where you have Caleb Wilson, Henry Basar there for the NBA draft itself. Seth Trimble did get a G League invite, all three guys in Chicago going through various drills ahead of next month's NBA draft. And we'll go over some of the measurements, but also talk about the debate that's going to, I think, really shape the NBA draft between Caleb Wilson and Cameron Boozer, just how fun it's going to be for Carolina fans to be involved in that. That's something we haven't been able to do here in quite some time. But we start every edition of the pod, as we always do, with the pod thought of the day. We go to Eric Church for today's pod thought. He, of course, if you don't know, delivered the commencement speech at graduation over the weekend. And the quote I got for him is, quote, "The most important thing for me as an artist is to have an identity," end quote. We can take that, parallel that right into a head coach and their program. And what's interesting when you have a head coaching change, like Carolina, where they go and bring in a former NBA guy to run their program, is this program has to find a new identity. It has to build a new identity. It had one under Dean Smith. It had one under Roy Williams. It did not have one at times under Hubert Davis. A big reason why he's no longer the head coach of Carolina basketball. We don't know exactly what Michael Malone's identity is going to be, but we're learning more about that as we see the type of players that they target in the transfer portal, the type of players that they target on the recruiting trail, the type of assistants that he has retained, the type of assistants that he's added. And before you know it, we'll be seeing this team on the court. They'll be in practice. They'll be doing drills. Summer ball will be here before you know it. Fall practice will be here before you know it. And sometime later this year, we'll get to learn what Carolina basketball looks like under Michael Malone. And I can say, as a fan of this program for 15 plus years, I'm really excited to see what this identity will ultimately look like in Chapel Hill.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's one of the main things that we're looking forward to seeing pretty early in the season is what is the identity of this group? Do they look different than they looked under Hubert Davis? You know, what is the identity of an NBA coached college basketball team look like? You know, we've never really had a guy like this where most of his career, especially his head coaching career, has been at the NBA level. And so what does that ultimately look like? Is it going to be a team that's going to run a lot of NBA principles? I would imagine so. One of the things that he's talked about that's a non-negotiable for him seems to be effort. Is that something that we're gonna see permeate? Because everybody talks about effort. Everybody talks about how important it is. Every coach says, look, I'm looking for the guys that are going to bring the most effort to the floor. If you don't bring the right effort level, then I'm going to take you off of the floor. And, for some guys, they're able to do that. For Carolina, in the last handful of years, it hasn't seemed like that's necessarily been the case at times under Hubert Davis. And so do you get that accountability under a Michael Malone? Does he go deeper with some of the teams? One of the things that we talked about with Hubert Davis, especially early on in his tenure, got a little bit better towards the end, but it still wasn't great, is just the lack of depth that Carolina had at certain times. Can Michael Malone form a deeper team? Because as you can see in college basketball, when you're deeper, it really does help you to be able to make long runs in the NCAA tournament. It helps you to, be able to survive a difficult conference season. It's the same thing in the NBA. You're learning that with teams that are going through the NBA playoffs right now, that the deeper you are, the better you are. And so I think those are the types of things that I'm interested to see whether or not those line up with what Michael Malone says. If it's something that we can see out there on the court almost immediately, or is it going to take a little bit of time to sort of set in? It'll be interesting to see how that works out. I will tell you, the schedule that they have right now, as of right now, really sets up for Carolina to be able to sort of, go through whatever growing pains they need to go through under Michael Malone, whatever, growing pains you're going to go through in the transfer portal era where there's so much turnover. And I think you come out on the other side in a pretty good spot.
Yeah, the schedule is still being finalized, and at some point we got to talk about it because it's very similar to the schedule that Hubert Davis put together last year. There are some marquee opponents on it. Nothing like what you're seeing powerhouse programs, Duke, Kentucky, UConn, Michigan, Gonzaga, programs that I think Carolina compares themselves to. They're scheduling one way, Carolina is scheduling another. We understood why Hubert Davis did it the way that he did it. We very well may understand why Michael Malone is doing it the way he's going to do it. Although probably when we get to that talking point sometime this offseason, I will have my doubts and concerns about it's the right way to schedule and prepare your team for an 18-game ACC gauntlet. Let's get into tonight's order of business. Three main topics on tonight's show. We'll start with the recruiting, just because, I think we've been so focused on the transfer portal and really the international recruiting, which is how Carolina is going about trying to add front court depth to their roster for next season, that there's still time for 2026 high school prospects to commit. You have until either late in this month or early in June to commit to a college basketball program. And so we probably got caught off guard. I know I was as well yesterday when On3 reported that Carolina was going to host a recruit over the weekend, and four-star small forward Kevin Thomas, 6'6" small forward who will be in Chapel Hill over the weekend. And very interesting prospect when you look at the fact that this was a guy that was committed to LSU, but not Will Wade's LSU. That previous coaching staff is who he had committed to. That coaching change allows him to, decommit. He reopens his recruitment. And despite being, the top 80 overall prospect, according to 24/7 Sports, he's number 79 overall, the number 32 small forward, and number 13 player from the state of Florida. Very, very quiet as far as we can tell in terms of the interest from other programs because of the transfer portal. And this is the downside, is when the portal opens, that's where all these coaches, all these programs put their entire focus, that you maybe forget about high school talent that could still be out there. And this could be a forgotten gem for Carolina or whoever he ends up ultimately committing to. Last year, he played for Sagemont Prep, where he averaged 17.3 points, 6.7 rebounds, 2.1 assists while leading Sagemont to the Florida Class A1 title. He played last summer on the Under Armour AAU circuit, where the numbers dipped a little bit, 11.6 points, 4.5 rebounds, 2.3 assists. He shot 40% from the field, just 32% from behind the three-point line. I believe that three-point percentage a lot more higher this year. In his high school season, he has connections to Carolina in terms of the fact that he's a former teammate of UNC signee Matt Abel. I believe KJ Smith, the son of Kenny Smith, happens to be his agent. So there's a lot of connections here that could really point to him visiting Chapel Hill this weekend and committing to Carolina. But just on the surface, you see this headline, you see this report. What did you make of Carolina getting ready to host a high school prospect this weekend in the form of 6'6" wing Kevin Thomas?
Yeah, I think, this is an interesting way to go about adding to the roster. I think it's probably a way that we did not really think of. And I think you're right. Unfortunately, the era that we're in, you are not going to think of this often. You're going to think we want experience. You're going to think with the overseas game, especially with Michael Malone, that, hey, we could bring in someone from overseas, but this is not the worst strategy to go with. You're getting somebody that's going to be a developmental piece. You feel like probably fits your roster and ultimately what you're looking for because of the fact that he is a relatively good shooter. I think when you watch him on film and you watch some of the highlight tapes that people have put together, and again, it's highlight tapes, man. When it comes to that, it's not going to be, they're not going to show any lowlights clearly. They're going to show the best moments from guys. And so when he was preparing, I think he was a guy that was supposed to transfer to Montverde Academy and then ended up back at Sagemont Prep. I think that was ultimately what was happening. And some of the games that he played, I think it was about 6 or 7 months ago, I mean, he ended up playing pretty well in those games. And some of the highlights that you saw, he really shot the ball well. So I think that's going to be his strength. And I think that's what Carolina is looking at with him and thinking he's going to be able to bring to the table. I said it when we were looking through the rest of the transfer portal and we were talking about, hey, Carolina still needs to add a shooter to this roster. I don't think there was anybody else out there that you really looked at. The most obvious one would be if Milan Momcilovic pulls out of the NBA draft. That dude pulls out of the NBA draft. I don't care how many guys you've got on your roster at that time. You should be looking to go after him. He is as elite of a shooter as you've seen from beyond the arc. I mean, the dude shot over 50% from three for most of the year at Iowa State. If he is even remotely open to coming to Carolina, you should be all over that. And so, but outside of him, I mean, there's really nobody else. There's no one that you look at and say is going to come in and immediately make a difference for Carolina. Now, the thing is Kevin Thomas going to come in and immediately be a huge player for Carolina? I don't know. I mean, you just go back to Matt Abel and what he did last year at NC State. That roster, granted, filled with a lot of transfers, and maybe things will be a little bit different at Carolina this year. Thomas is a different prospect. Matt Abel was a guy that was ranked inside the top 25 prospects, and he was in a bench role a year ago. I would expect that Kevin Thomas, if you're thinking that he's going to come here and start, if you're thinking that's the type of guy that Carolina is bringing in, then you're probably thinking a little bit too aggressively. But does that mean that he still can't be a player that can contribute this year? Does that mean he can't be a guy that contributes off the bench for Carolina? Oh, he certainly can. And if you're wondering, LSU not necessarily the class of college basketball, if you're wondering about that and saying, well, that's not really a great spot to be headed to play college basketball. Stu was also being recruited by Miami, by Auburn. He took official visits there. So, this is a pretty legitimate prospect that Carolina is looking into here. I just think, you're probably looking at him as more of a bench guy this year than you're looking at him to come in and make a huge immediate impact.
Yeah, if anyone is looking at him as a starter, that's certainly not the message I was conveying, but you don't have to start to be an impactful player. You can come off the bench and have a defined role, which I think his role would be to spread the floor, provide perimeter shooting, which is something Carolina's roster is still in need of. Like we're so focused on adding a 5-man, and that's still the biggest need. I would still argue, even with Matt Abel back, assuming that he does not go through and enter the NBA draft, Carolina's roster needs at least another shooter. You could argue it needs two, with just how much of a premium you put on shooting, even at the collegiate level, nowadays. I think that's ultimately what led Carolina to Kevin Thomas. Is first off, he has the size. He's at 6'6". He fits the mold of what Michael Malone and this staff want. We saw, Hubert Davis prioritize size with his last roster. That's not going anywhere anytime soon. Carolina wants to be big 1 through 5 across the board. They want to be big even with their guys coming off the bench. But, this would be a guy that you would ask to come in, and he'd probably play 10, 12, 14 minutes a night. And if he shot 36% from behind the three-point line on a volume of three-point shots, Carolina would take that and run with it, because I still don't know really outside of Abel who on this roster is going to be that knockdown outside shooter. I think Terrence Brown and Nicholas Abdallas will have the ability to shoot the three-point shot. Those are guys that want to play downhill. They want to play they want to get inside and make plays at the rim. Maximo Adams, I think that's a guy he's a 3-level scorer. I don't know if he just wants to stand behind the 3-point line and shoot. I think you want those guys. You need those guys. And if we're talking about running modern NBA offense and NBA principles, there's a lot of 5-out stuff that Michael Malone's going to want to run. You can only run that stuff if you've got shooters that can spread the floor and can stretch the defense, something that Carolina failed to do a year ago. So, I don't think you should look at the fact that he was going to LSU and wonder just how good of a basketball player he is. You can't. That stuff doesn't matter as much nowadays as it did 10, 15 years ago, because he probably committed to LSU because of what the financial offer was compared to the other schools. That's also a school that, as we've seen with the Will Wade hire and what they've supposedly committed financially, they want to win in basketball. It's gone up a level since they brought him back to run their program, but that's a program that is not afraid to spend money. So that's probably what ultimately led him there. You should not look at that as he was going to play basketball at LSU. That's a power conference school in the SEC, which for the last couple of years has been a better basketball conference top to bottom than the conference that we call home, which is still right now the ACC. So I think it's going to be a real interesting development because per my knowledge, this is the first high school prospect, I think, to visit campus that's uncommitted since Michael Malone got hired. Of course, we all know what happened with the Dylan Mingo situation. Carolina decided to move off of Mingo and go in a different direction. This was something Hubert Davis was really, really good at. It felt like when there was a certain prospect that he needed, it felt like once he just got him to Chapel Hill, he was able to land him. Can Michael Malone have that same impact? Can he get this guy in here who's got connections to the current roster with Matt Abel? You've got KJ Smith, and it's crazy to think about him already being as an agent. considering we're less than a decade removed from his playing career, to go alongside his brief career on television. You've got that connection going as well. Can this guy visit Chapel Hill 24, 36 hours and commit to you? Because if he does, what that does do, outside of a guy in the draft maybe pulling out, it does allow you to pour your entire focus into adding big men, which is still the top priority. But I will stress to you enough that Carolina's roster is still in need of shooting, and maybe Kevin Thomas is the guy to answer that call. So it's gonna be interesting. It feels like this could be a real big weekend for Michael Malone, and we'll see if maybe Kevin Thomas is the one to get the ball rolling in that regard. Let's get to the news that came out today, which also caught me off guard. Was not preparing to see this headline from Inside Carolina on 3 Sports as well. We know Malone is very busy, actively wanting to add to his coaching staff. Had Brian Tabaldi on campus last week for an interview, but nothing official has come out of that. But we got this news today that former national champion Deion Thompson, 4-year letterman at Carolina, is joining the staff as a grad assistant. He is done playing professionally overseas, where he spent the last 15 years, played in 13 different countries. So you're talking almost a different country per year for Deion Thompson in his pro career overseas. But he's going to enroll in the Keenan Flagler School of Business. So that means he's going to join the staff as a grad assistant. And I got to tell you, was not prepared to see that news. That was not something that we thought was even on the radar. I think this is phenomenal. Like, you're bringing a guy back within your program. So now 3 former Tar Heels on the roster. You have the retainees of Sean May, Pat Sullivan. You add Deion Thompson, Michael Malone stressed, wanting to strengthen the bond between the Carolina basketball players and the current program. But we spend so much time nowadays talking about the overseas influence. And we're seeing more and more programs go overseas to find basketball players. Well, you're adding a guy, yes, in a grad assistant role, but how invaluable could he be just for the transition for Esayan Keita if Carolina was to maybe add an Alexandros Somodurov from Greece, the Italian Wemby? Like, I think this could be a really big resource off the court just as much as it will be on the court, with Deion Thompson joining the staff and serving in a grad assistant role.
Yeah, I loved it. I thought this was exactly, this is what these positions are supposed to be. Now, I mean, he's a guy that's coming back to school. Normally you would think that it'd be some more recent guys that would be doing this. But I love the fact that, again, you're mixing the experience of the guys that you're going out. The thing that we need to stress is this should not stand in the way of them going to get Brian Tabaldi or whoever else they're adding to their staff. This is a grad assistant role. So it's not a position on this staff itself. So, I mean, yeah, that position's still going to be open. You're blending the history of Carolina basketball with what Michael Malone ultimately wants to bring in to his staff that he feels will be able to run the best ship and be the most successful at Carolina. That was one of the biggest things that we stressed about the hire that Carolina made, was you needed someone that understood the role of the Carolina family, understood how important it was and how involved it still needed to be. And I think that's what you're getting in Deion Thompson. And with Deion, I mean, he's going to be a guy that's going to be able to tell some of these dudes on this roster, about all different types of experiences. You mentioned all the different places that he's been across the globe. I mean, yeah, he's about as experienced as anybody when it comes to living life. And so I think he's going to be a great sounding board for a lot of guys on this roster. And he's going to be someone that can teach them, that even if you don't necessarily get to the NBA, because not everybody that's on your roster is going to get to the NBA, you're still going to be able to get to other spots and have a successful career. I mean, Deion Thompson was one of those guys that we probably looked at from that championship run and said, hey, if he had a 3 or 4 year career overseas, that would be successful. He lasted a lot longer than that. And so, I think that's one of the things that he can sort of tell a lot of the other guys on this roster. He's one of those guys that I think you don't really mention him as much with those title teams, but he was such a lovable part of that title team back in 2009. The run to the Final Four in 2008, like that was a guy that you really felt like was probably the most, underrated player on those teams for what he brought. And then, of course, 2010, he ends up becoming the guy. He had to take over because everybody else left. And, it's one of those seasons. And, I remember a few years ago, I think it was his junior year, Garrison Brooks, maybe it was his sophomore year. Garrison Brooks went off, had a huge season. It's very comparable for Deion Thompson, where both of those seasons, those guys played incredibly well. Not a lot of other guys really did. And so those seasons became rather forgettable, but you'll always remember how special those players were during that season. So I think it's really cool. Another thing is a guy to shout out. Isaac Shade tweeted this out earlier today, our guy over on Locked On Tar Heels. He said that this was something that he had been hearing from Bill Robinson, who's a coach that joins him every so often on his podcast. There had been some rumblings, on their side of things that this was going to happen. So credit to them. They were the ones that were out ahead of this story. And, I think it's a really cool one for Carolina that they get Deion Thompson back on campus and working with this year's group.
Yeah, it's going to be. I think it's a fun. It's a fun story. It's a cool story. Makes me feel somewhat old that I have now seen Deion. I watched Deion Thompson's entire college basketball career, and then obviously did not watch him play overseas, but this guy has now completed a very successful overseas career and is now coming back to join the Carolina basketball program. And what you love about Deion, if you follow him on social media, this was a guy much like Marcus Ginyard that took Carolina with him overseas, and was always posting about Carolina when they would be playing the Duke game. He would have the post on Instagram where he's up at the wee hours of the night, being there to watch the team play, supporting them on various NCAA tournament runs. Would always come back in the summer. Maybe has the most impressive tattoo of a coach I've ever seen on a human body. He's got a great tattoo of Roy Williams that if I wasn't a pansy, I would go to my local tattoo parlor and get the same thing inked on me. Can't handle it. Your guy right here is afraid of needles. So this is a Carolina guy through and through. And these are the guys that we love. And these are the guys that we like to put on a pedestal because he had a successful career at Carolina. He had a successful career, professionally. And when his playing career was over, guess where his heart drew him back to? It drew him back to Chapel Hill, where he's gonna be in school. He's gonna be a student again. But this is a guy that I think all along during his playing career was itching to get back to Chapel Hill, itching to just be back a part of Carolina basketball, and he will be doing so in a grad assistant role. And as you mentioned, this does not stand in the way of Michael Malone adding to his coaching staff. You got to remember, he has two positions that he can fill because unless Jeff Lebo and Brad Frederick have been retained and we just don't know about it, those guys are no longer going to be on staff. So you've got those two positions to fill. You've added Chuck Martin, but we've seen staffs grow. We want to be big-time college basketball operation like we should be. Look at the staffs that you see at like the Alabamas, where they've got two rows of assistants and like scouts. And, that's what I want. That's what I expect. And if they're hiring, send me an application. Because I would love to sit on that bench right there and love to tell college basketball players what the crap they're doing wrong. So I think I do a really good job of that. I do a good job of it here on the podcast, but be cool to have Deion back on the sidelines. Cool to have him back within the Carolina basketball family. He's a Tar Heel through and through. Let's
By
get
the way,
to
I have looked up this tattoo. This tattoo is insane. Have you seen this thing?
yes.
I mean, he got it back in 2019. I mean, this is incredibly detailed work. I would like to say that I would be able to handle it because I do have Tar Heel ink on my body currently. That's a lot of work. That's the whole. It's basically his whole upper arm. That's I don't know, man. It's damn cool though. I got to give it to Dion, man. And one thing that I think is awesome, seriously, is do you know how much someone has to mean to you to put them on your arm like that? That shows, I mean, you can say whatever you want about any other coach in college basketball. How many players, former players, are putting a photograph of their coach on their arm in ink? And it's insane to me. And it shows how loved Roy Williams is.
Yeah, we can address your tattoo. You have an outline. It's not really a tattoo because it's not Carolina ink.
This is what I got for free, baby. They were willing to give me a free. It was a podcast that I was doing. I got a free outline. I haven't wanted to get it colored in because it's going to fade anyways, and then the colors look weird. So, if I'm going to get it, honestly, if I'm going to get it colored in, I'd rather get it colored in black ink because I think that would last a little bit longer.
Black's not a school color, though.
That's the thing. So I think the best way to leave it is just leave it as an outline. But I would definitely like to get some more Tar Heel ink. Maybe that, though, just a little bit too much, especially since I didn't play for Roy Williams myself.
Yeah, I would just, moving forward, refer to it as a permanent stenciling. No, it's not a tattoo.
Okay, would you be able to handle it? I don't think so.
No,
exactly.
But it's not a tattoo. Anyone can draw an outline on their arm and make it stick. It's you know. But no, I remember seeing the tattoo and being amazed, and maybe one day I'll grow a pair, I'll drop a set and be able to handle it. Because I'd love to get something of Carolina tattooed onto my body. Let's get to something that, quite frankly, we don't get to talk a lot about on the pod, because we don't put a lot of guys into the NBA. Hopefully that's changing. I think that's one of the clear directives of Michael Malone is he wants to make Carolina an NBA factory. If you go back and listen to his introductory press conference, he told you without telling you that the talent wasn't coming through the door and being developed like it should be at a program that's got the history, the tradition, the NBA pedigree in totality that our program has at Carolina. The NBA draft combine is ongoing right now. It's like a 9-day process for these guys in Chicago where they do a bunch of drills, interviews, they scrimmage, they go 5-on-5. And so I did want to really briefly just run through some of the results that came through and then talk about Caleb Wilson and Henry Basar specifically. So this is some of the measurables that have come out of Chicago. We'll start with C-Dub. He measured in at 6'9" barefoot, weighing 211 pounds with a 7-foot wingspan and a 9-foot standing reach. As for Big Henry, he came in at 6'11", 227 pounds, a 7'2" wingspan, a 9'3" standing reach. Matt Abel, he measured in at 6'3", 195 pounds, with a 6'8" wingspan and an 8'7" standing reach. God, I'd love to have that on the roster for next year. Then Seth Trimble, again, they're on a G League invitation. He measured in at 6'7", and he recorded a top tier max vert leap at 43.5 inches, and he had a 38.5 inch no step vertical. So he's tested really well, and maybe as much as anybody has maybe improved his NBA future, at least with the G League set up with what he's done so far. So those are the measurables. Again, it's not as maybe is fun to talk about is what we get to do with the NFL draft with the 40 and some of the other different drills. But you're seeing some Carolina guys that test really well, and they're getting some really good feedback. So if you didn't know, on Sunday, for some ungodly reason, the NBA decided to have their NBA draft lottery on Mother's Day at 3:00 because everybody was trying to make time to watch that. We now have the official NBA draft order. And you know, Caleb Wilson's not up for conversation, in my opinion, to be the first overall pick. I saw Josh Graham, former WSJS host, who's now doing overnights for Westwood One, trying to make the argument that Caleb Wilson should be in the conversation to be the top pick. I don't agree with that. I do think that should go in between AJ DeBanza and Darren Peterson. But now that we have the draft order set and we know who's drafting in the lottery, do we have a preferred landing spot for Caleb Wilson, who we all believe at the worst is going top 5?
Well, I mean, look, first of all, the destination that is number 1, I would not want him at. I don't want him anywhere near the Washington Wizards organization. That organization has been a disaster for the majority of their existence, from when they went from the Bullets to the Wizards. And look, there are multiple people. You brought up Josh Graham. I mean, Lou Williams is pushing this, that he should be someone that should be in consideration to go number 1 overall. Corey Brewer, who is on running back as well. There was a clip circulating around today. He believes that Caleb Wilson should be talked about in that vein as well, possibly being selected first overall. And, you know, Jay Williams, he was a guy that compared him and said, you know, his floor at this point would be Kevin Garnett. He at one time thought that was the ceiling for him. He thinks his ceiling could be Giannis Antetokounmpo. Now, that's a little crazy to me. Even, you know, though I think that when it comes to Giannis, there are some people that would say, well, you know, you don't necessarily want him on the Knicks. How great of a player do you think he is? He is as complete of a player as there is in the NBA. The dude you wonder what interest level does he have in playing at times? And he does have injury issues. With Caleb, I don't know if he's that good of a shooter. You know, they did the spot up drill earlier today. He was 11 of 25, which is solid, I think, especially for him since he didn't shoot a lot of threes this past year. But I'm with you. I don't know if he's in that conversation to go number 1. I think that's probably a little aggressive. I think it comes down to 2 guys. I think it's either you believe in AJ DeBanza and you think that he's the best player in this draft, or you look at the upside of Darren Peterson and you think that with his length, he could be, you know, just as complete of a player as you're going to find in this draft. You know, with Caleb, I think the best destination got taken off the board. The best destination for him, if it would have happened, would have been for him to land with the Indiana Pacers at number 4 if they were still picking. But that's gone. And now I think it's the team that's at number 4. I know this, people are going to say, why the hell would you want another Tar Heel to land with the Chicago Bulls? But again, it's an organization that has done it before. You know, they're a team that, you know, has recently made the NBA play-in. So it feels like they're not that far away from being a team that can get back into the play-in, be able to compete almost immediately with Caleb Wilson on its roster, where some of the other teams, I just don't know if you can get there with those teams. I think you could make the argument that some of them, you know, depending on who's active for those teams, guys that they decide to hold on to instead of trading, that's mainly Memphis, that would be a spot where you could go and succeed. But I think it might be Chicago. We got to see who they end up hiring as a head coach. That's going to be important. But I do think that is certainly the destination that I look at and think he could have the most success at if they do end up taking him at number 4.
Yeah, that to me is the correct answer. And I'm here for them having to draft another Tar Heel to save their franchise. Michael Jordan did it in 1982. Kobe White was a better player than what he'll ever get credit for just how much off the court, how much dysfunction was in the front office for that Chicago Bulls franchise. If I knew that John Morant wasn't going to pull a blicky out and go AWOL, I would think he would be a lot of fun in Memphis. Like, I think that'd be a fun tandem to watch, especially with how good that he could be in the open court. But I don't know what the future of the Memphis Grizzlies ultimately is with John Morant. So I look at Chicago, and Chicago I think needs someone with his mindset. Like, he just had the quote that went up once we got on the air here, talking about how wherever he's going to go, he's going to change the franchise. He's going to change the culture, and he claims that's what he did in North Carolina. And I think a lot of people might look at that and scoff, but he did change, I think, some of the cultural issues that existed with Carolina basketball under Hubert Davis, because up until he got injured, there weren't many games where they weren't ready to play, because he wasn't going to let them not be ready to play. I know they had issues maybe closing games out the way we wanted them to close them out, but that was that guy was a dog. That guy was a one-on-one. He lived to compete. He lived to be on the basketball court. And I do think he changed the culture in a lot of ways, and was going to be, I think, had Hubert Davis done enough to save his job, he would have had Caleb Wilson a lot to thank him for. So what I think is going to be interesting is, because I'm with you, I do not think he's a tremendous player. I think when Peterson decided to play college basketball, he was the best player in college basketball last year as a freshman. His scoring is like NBA vet good already. DeBansa maybe is the most polished 18-year-old we've seen in quite some time. Those guys are going to battle it out for one who's going to be the top overall pick, which means that the draft really starts in a lot of ways at 3, because people got to figure out, are they drafted Wilson or they drafted Cameron Boozer out of Duke, who maybe has the highest floor of all these guys, just because the dude's a freaking winner. All he's done is win at every level, despite not winning in the NCAA tournament. Thank you, UConn. And I think, we talk about how the rivalry has evolved over the years. This will be a debate that'll keep the rivalry on the surface in the summer months. Like, in a time where maybe we're not arguing with Duke fans, we'll be arguing with Duke fans, because this Cameron Boozer, Caleb Wilson conversation, it's going to dominate the draft just as much as the Darren Peterson, AJ DeBansa.
I think it's the biggest question in the draft. I think, based off of there was a poll that they did earlier this week, and I don't remember if it was the media or if it was certain scouts or something like that. They overwhelmingly picked DeBansa. So this might be a debate that we're having. But I think a lot of people, no offense to Darren Peterson, they're going to look at the stuff that happened at Kansas. They're going to look at the mystery behind why he wasn't playing, and they're going to wonder. There are some organizations that are saying, look, if we're going to draft you number 1 overall, we need you to be out there as often as possible. We don't want you showing signs of load management when you're in college, let alone getting into the NBA. And so I think that's probably something that they're going to try to avoid. That's why they, more than likely, DeBansa will be the number 1 overall pick. I think the Boozer-Wilson conversation is incredibly fascinating, because you could say, well, let's go to the head-to-head matchup. Who played better in the head-to-head matchup? I mean, you could have a debate either side. I think that it was Caleb, because I think that what he was able to do in the first half, basically carrying his team because nobody else could really do anything in that game, at the start, I think that is probably the more impressive part of the two when it came to that battle. Still, that second half that Cam Boozer had, finishing with 24 and 11, pretty damn good. This guy is definitely special, and you saw that really throughout the entire season. So I think it's going to be incredibly difficult for these GMs to have to decide between these two players because they play the same position. So what do you really want? Do you want a guy that has the floor that Cam Boozer has, where you are getting a really solid borderline all-star type of player? By the way, the floor for Caleb Wilson really not that far away from him, but there might be some things, especially if you question the three-point shooting, that might be something that steers you away from him because maybe you just don't think that develops over time. If you're not able to necessarily stretch the floor out of that 4 spot in the NBA, it is going to limit you a little bit. I still think that there are going to be a lot of people that are going to look at him that are going to say, if you give him time, he's going to develop that outside shot. And if you've got a guy that is basically Kevin Garnett with a consistent outside shot, how do you really stop that type of guy? I think that's the way that a lot of people are going to look at it. So I think you're right. It's going to be down to the wire, incredibly fascinating what Memphis chooses to do. And the thing is that we know that that's where Memphis is going. I would be stunned. I know there are some people that are saying, hey, you just go out, rip off the John Morant Band-Aid and just say, we're drafting Darius Acuff. It is what it is. I don't think that's the way they're going to go. I think their biggest weakness right now is at power forward. Santi Aldama is the guy who currently starts right there. I got to tell you, I don't watch a lot of the NBA, and maybe that's on me. Maybe he really is a player that has something to his game. I've never heard of the guy. So to me, that you want to get someone with name recognition in there into your starting lineup, you're going to draft one of these two guys. It'll be really, really amazing to watch these two go back and forth. It's a battle of Duke, Carolina for who ends up getting that 3rd overall pick.
All right, the last thing I wanted to do from an NBA draft perspective, and I think this will be something that we will monitor over the next 3.5 weeks or so, was with the lottery set, the draft order set, Henry Basar in Chicago. Take a look at some updated mock drafts for the former Carolina big man. And I pulled 3. I pulled CBS Sports, On 3, and ESPN. All 3 have Henry Basar as a first-round draft selection. CBS Sports and ESPN both had him slotted 25th, going to the LA Lakers, and On 3 had him going 27th. That, of course, to the Boston Celtics. When I see that, and I'm sure there are more mocks that have him inside the first round, it does make it easy for me to accept his decision. And I don't know what's really changed from when he entered the draft till now. Because when he entered the draft, he was not this wide. He wasn't this often projected as a first-round pick. He just wasn't, which is why I was very critical of the decision. We knew if he went into the draft, he was going to be a back end of the first-round draft pick anyway, just because of how deep and talented this draft class is. When I see those 3, it's really hard for me to be upset. It's really hard for me to be critical of the decision. You mentioned Shade. They were talking last night about, was there a pathway for him to come back to Carolina just because he hasn't, announced an agency? It was just whenever he entered, it was with the intent to stay within the draft. I find it hard to believe there's a pathway back for him. And if he's going to be in the first round like he is right now, I can't be upset at that because the money becomes very comparable. And I think this is a guy, and I've mentioned it, I think off the court was just ready for his next phase. He's engaged. He's set to get married. I don't think he wanted to be sitting in astronomy 101 on a Tuesday before having to play Boston College later that night. Like, I think he just wants to play basketball. He spend time with his fiance, get a dog, and start doing the family thing. And if you're going to do that in LA and Boston, 2 iconic franchises, 2 of the better cities in America, to maybe get to travel and experience, I can't be critical of that. So I do think after the lottery being said and some updated mock drafts. I think it's safe to say we've got to shut the door on there being a pathway for Big Henry being back in Carolina blue next year.
Yeah, I can't see it. I would just be absolutely stunned. And especially, going into the combine, if you would have told me, look, man, he just goes there and has a horrible performance. Things aren't falling for him. He struggles maybe with the vertical or something like that, which that was pretty unlikely to begin with. But let's say something like that happens. They don't see enough explosion, whatever, and he ends up falling out of the first round. Maybe there was a thin chance that he could come back. But at this point, I don't think so. I know some of the stats that were being shared yesterday. I think it was Jeremiah Artacho from, I hope I'm pronouncing his name right. If I butchered that, I apologize. From the Daily Tar Heel, he tweeted out last night some of the combine results in terms of the shooting numbers that Henry was putting up. He was amongst the top players at his position. So this dude's doing what we all thought he was going to do, man. He's showing you that he is a modern day big. He fits exactly what the NBA is looking for. And yeah, is he going to go there and be a starter with one of the teams that he's probably going to land with? Probably not. I don't think that's going to ultimately be what ends up happening. But is he going to be a guy that's going to be able to contribute? I mean, you look at the Lakers. I mean, if you watch them last night, they don't really have a center that's locked in. I mean, Jackson Hayes was solid. I think he's, a really, decent player at the NBA level. But do I think he's a guy that can develop into the type of offensive player that Henry Basar can? No, I don't think so. The Boston Celtics, they've got some guys down low that I think a lot of people, look at and probably think, are they good enough to be able to take them ultimately where they want to go to? I mean, I think his name is Q Kada, was the guy that you saw a lot of during the 76ers series. That's a guy that, Henry Basar is probably a better player than him when it's all said and done. And so I think that could be a team that, would be interested in him. You're talking about, the Lakers, granted, they're going to have to reset because I don't see LeBron going back there. I think LeBron's probably going somewhere else. I'm of the camp that thinks he's going to go to the Golden State Warriors. I think that's where he ends up surfacing at because he wants to stay on the West Coast where he currently lives with his family. But, I mean, you look at some of the other teams. I mean, if you go to Cleveland, backing up Jared Allen to start your career wouldn't be a bad way to go about it. Minnesota, backing up Rudy Gobert, getting to learn from him. That would be something that would be attractive. Denver, being the backup to Nikola Jokic. I mean, and what they've been able to do with Nikola in this time there. I mean, granted, a lot of that was done by Michael Malone, but still, I really think that would be something that would be attractive to a guy like Henry Basar. So I find it near impossible that he ends up coming back. Is it completely off the table? No, because as you said, I don't know if it's that he hasn't signed with an agent, or maybe did they do away with that rule? I thought they might have did away with that rule a few years ago because of, player freedom and everything like that, of allowing these guys to be able to do basically whatever they want. So he will have the option to come back, but it would take a monumental fall from where he is after the first couple of days of the combine for him to come back, I would think.
All right, let's close out this edition of the podcast with some closing notes. And there's nothing of the Carolina basketball variety. We have to shut this thing down. It's really just all podcast related. You may or may not have seen, depending on those of you that are on social media, you've seen some social media pages pop up for the podcast. We are officially now on Instagram. We are on TikTok, and I'll tell you about the email here in just a minute. But one of the big things this summer is bringing the podcast into the digital age and just getting a lot more social. We want to be a lot more interactive with y'all, the listeners. Without y'all, without the audience, we would not have the platform to do what we do. So we want you to follow us on Instagram. where I'll be posting clips from each edition of the show. Here moving forward, we put the first post yesterday. The username for that is, and it's all one word, and it's long, but I had to get creative. But it's the Four Corners Podcast 2021. All that lowercase. The 4 is spelled out. So the Four Corners Podcast 2021 on Instagram. As for TikTok, little different. It's all lowercase. It's also the Four Corners Podcast 2021. The difference is the 4 is the number. It's not spelled out. Somehow that was a username that was taken on TikTok, believe it or not. So if you want to go and follow us on both of those accounts, and then the email, want to try to do a mailbag episode. Want to try to get a lot more interactive with y'all in that regards. We love talking Carolina basketball. So if you want to send us Carolina basketball topics, feel free to do so. If you have pod thought of the day suggestions, I'm open to taking those as well. Or if you want to send some fan mail, or by God, you want to send some hate mail, we're open to that as well. If you want to email us, get in touch with us. That email you can reach us at is the Four Corners Podcast 2021 at Gmail, and the 4 is spelled out, not the number there. So this is going to be one of the big things we're doing this summer, is just getting a lot more social, getting a lot more digital, wanting to have more interactions with y'all, because y'all have been a great supportive fan base from the very beginning, and want to give y'all as much access to the podcast as humanly possible. So get to those accounts again on Instagram, TikTok. And if you want to get in touch with us, don't be afraid to shoot us an email as well. But with that, folks, that is going to wrap up this edition of the show. In the meantime, we will direct you guys to the website. That's HeelToughBlog.com, where we had you covered with the news today of Deion Thompson joining the coaching staff. We had you covered with the Kevin Thomas news yesterday, so he'll visit Chapel Hill this weekend. We'll keep you up to date on all the latest around the Carolina basketball program. Anthony is doing the same for you on the Carolina football side of things as well. All that great coverage, again, HeelToughBlog.com. As for the podcast, you guys know where to find us. Every major podcasting platform, just search the Four Corners Podcast and we will pop up. There, we strongly encourage you guys to rate, review, and subscribe. That way you don't miss any audio editions of the show. If you're a video consumer to the podcast, the best way to keep up with us, like and follow the Facebook page at Heel Tough Blog, subscribe to the YouTube channel at Heel Tough Blog, or follow us both on Twitter at HTB_Josh for me, at HTB Anthony for him. We both post the links to our accounts. The second we go live, you'll be notified. You can jump in and be a part of the conversation. But with that, folks, that is going to wrap up this edition of the show. I do want to thank Anthony once again for hosting with me. We want to thank you guys for both watching and listening. And as always, go Tar Heels.